It's not annoying at all.
It's AMSRM or whatever the fuck it's called. You know?
ASMR.
Whatever. Same stupid shit.
Okay. Welcome back to Death by Southwest bonus episode. Episode 9. Is this? No, this is episode 10 lookup list. This is part 2 of Isabel Celis and Maribel Gonzalez. So this was episode 10 lookup list. And we had some scheduling issues with Jenna, so she had a conflict. So we have Mark standing in today for Jenna.
Hello, all.
So I'm going to apologize in advance for his lack of podcasting experience.
I'm not seasoned by any means. So,
that's right.
You know.
That's fine. You have a nice podcast voice, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And also, so this is Jenna's lookup list. So these are the questions that she wrote down. A lot of them are actually not super specific to the episode, which means that this is a perfect one for you to stand in for. But there are a few that are specific to the episode, so you may not know, you may not know a ton about it. Although I think you're familiar with the story.
Well, yeah, I grew up here in Tucson, and I remember the initial murder that happened, and there was no results. And then finally, when they found the bodies, which is actually very close to where my mother lives.
That's right. I talked about that. I kept it a little more general, though, because Jenna's very paranoid about sharing too much information. So when we were talking about like the corners where they found the bodies, the corner of Trico and South Aver Valley or whatever. And at first I said, that's where Mark's mom lived. And she looked at me and she's like, no. She's like, don't. And so then I said, people that Mark's close with live here. But I mean, realistically, that area is quite large. Like nobody's going to find your mom's house.
Well, yeah, it's like lots of acreage. What I was shocked is, I heard about the case originally and, over time you forget about it, is just to find out where they were discovered, because it's remote, but it's not that remote. I mean, there's tons of people who live out there and a lot of traffic. So I don't see, like, any time of day, it would be very hard to, like, dump a body and, like, get away with it. But apparently they did.
Yeah, well, he got away with it for a while. Since then, he's been caught. And I have some updates on the case, actually, to share. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. We're just going to go down the line of Jenna's questions here. So her first question was, do you bruise when you're dead? What do you think?
I think you do. It's called lividity, I believe. It's when you have, I may be saying that wrong, but it's,
no, that's how you say it. But lividity is how your blood,
it pools,
like settles in your body.
Yeah, so you won't necessarily bruise, but it looks like bruising when if you're killed and you're laid face down, it'll be on your front side, back side, whatnot. But
it's where the blood cells. You're right. It says lividity refers to the bluish purple discoloration of skin after death. It's a common sign associated with livor mortis, one of the 4 post-mortem signs of death, along with pallor mortis, algor mortis, and rigor mortis. And it occurs within hours after death. So you're kind of right. Okay, so you say yes, that you can bruise after death. What if you had to give a very concise definition of a bruise? What would that definition be?
Well, it's a hematoma. It's when...
What's a hematoma?
Well, it's like impact on your body, which is like, as like you get punched, your body's trying to heal, so it sends blood cells there. So that's why you get the discoloration and...
The what?
Discolorization. And the blood settles there. That's why you get a black eye, because the blood's rushing there, and then you get the purple bruise or whatnot.
Okay, that's pretty close. I have the exact definition to share of a bruise. So a succinct definition of a bruise is that it is a collection of blood visible to the naked eye as an area of discoloration, which has, I don't know what this word means, extravasated.
Spell it out, girl.
Extravasated. Yeah, that's right. Extravasated into the surrounding tissues after vascular disruption, principally as a result of trauma or occasionally spontaneously as a result of disease. Bruises are typically caused by blunt force trauma, although they may be associated with any type of impact and can accompany many different types of wounds. So that was a lot of bigger words, but essentially what you said.
Yeah, I was right.
Yeah, you were right. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the answer. I got a couple different answers to do you bruise once dead. I found several sources. Some people said no. Some sources said bruising is bleeding into a surrounding tissue, and you can't bleed when you're dead because your heart isn't pumping blood. So I first read that and I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then another source said post-mortem bruising is entirely possible if the force is inflicted shortly after death, like within 2 hours.
Yeah, like if you killed somebody and then, 20 minutes later you hit them with a baseball bat,
right.
It's probably going to show a mark.
Right. So they say that within 2 hours because the blood hasn't settled yet, lividity hasn't set in. Whoa.
That was my big word.
And I found 2 case studies. These are actual cases that kind of illustrate that. So in case 1, a 37-year-old man was found lying on the river shore and taken out of the water by a rescuer who was grasping at his right upper arm about an hour and a half after he died. And then upon the examination, the autopsy. Yeah, the autopsy. Thank you. They found 2 thumb-sized discolorations resembling antemortem bruising on the surface of his right upper arm. So them pulling him out of the water, it was even though it was 90 minutes after he died, there was still bruising there.
Yeah, it's still kind of an aggressive move, so
yeah,
that makes sense.
And then the other one, it says, a 40-year-old woman was found similarly lying in water and removed in the same way approximately an hour and 45 minutes after death. Upon examination, they also found 2 thumb-sized discolorations on the inner surface of her upper arms from where they pulled them out. So, just actual instances where these people were dead for almost 2 hours and then some kind of serious force was put on their body and they did have bruising. So another question on the lookup list is why didn't they contact Valerie Colon, Maribel's mom, prior to putting that they found a body on the news? So briefly, just so you know what we're talking about, is Maribel Gonzalez, the second girl who went missing and was found dead 3 days after she went missing. Her mom found out about it on the news because they found a body at Aver Valley and whatever. And she was watching the news. Her daughter was missing at this point, and she'd been out looking for her, came home, turned on the news, and saw that a body had been found of a young girl that was unidentified, but she had a small butterfly tattoo under her collarbone. And her mom was like, oh my God, that's Maribel. And then it was obviously confirmed through DNA after the fact.
Yeah, I don't know the circumstance behind that, but it sounds like a fuck up by the police department, because usually you find a body or something like that, it's unidentified, but them specifically saying that kind of gives it away. And right. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's pretty much policy that they need to inform the family before they make it news if they have a positive ID. So maybe that's why they didn't.
That's it. So I couldn't actually.
So I think it's kind of a slip up on whoever was reporting it, whoever the chief of police, whoever said that during the press conference, is they should have just said, a body of a young girl was found, unidentified,
and not given that identifying thing. But so I actually couldn't find anything specific as to yes, that's what happened or no. But looking at it realistically, you find a body, news outlets were alerted, whether on purpose or by accident, and they put it on the news. She was unidentified at the time, so they couldn't alert the family. They didn't know who it was. But that tattoo let her mom know that's who it is. So it says she testified at the murderer, Christopher Clements, is who was found to be the murderer. She testified at his trial last year that it was not until she turned on the TV that she found out police found her daughter's body. She recognized the tattoo on the collarbone, and then she called the police. And then they, tested, and it was confirmed. And the only other thing I found about this tattoo is that 2 years after her daughter was found dead, so they didn't have a killer at this point. The body had been found. She knew it was
Well,
her
wait a minute,
daughter.
How old was she?
She was 13.
She had a tattoo?
Jenna said the same exact thing in the episode, but like I got my first tattoo when I was 13.
Okay.
It's uncommon, but it happens.
Well, that's kind of a dead giveaway too. Like,
right. A young girl's body. Well, and it was actually not a butterfly. It was butterfly wings, I guess, under her, I want to say under her right collarbone. Maybe it was her left. But so this is going back. This is before they know that Christopher Clements is the murderer. But I thought this was interesting. 2 years after her daughter's was that a fart or a phone?
I don't see any phones ringing. I think it might have been a fart.
Fart from Izzy. So 2 years after her daughter was found murdered, her mom, Valerie, agreed to meet with a psychic on the Maury Povich show. She said she was astonished to see how much the psychic knew about her daughter. At this point, they're looking for the murderer still. And the psychic shed light on the moments leading up to her death. The psychic said, whose name was Christopher Allen, said, it was actually that I think people are used to hearing Izzy drinking water. It's fine.
I feel like we're doing it in a cave, it's all dripping in the back, Well, the sound is really good in here, so we're going to go ahead and do that.
Just adds atmosphere. The psychic said, I think she overpowered her attacker as he was attempting to rape her. And when he realized he wasn't successful, that's when he got aggressive and she fought back. Valerie said that there was some comfort in learning that her daughter put up a fight. And the psychic said that her daughter's killer may have also murdered someone else. It's kind of interesting because he did murder someone else.
Yeah.
He murdered Isabel Celis, the other 6-year-old little girl. And who knows, he maybe murdered other people beyond that. But so this was before they even had a suspect. They knew nothing at this point. This was 2016. So that was just a little piece of information I found. So next question. Robbery versus burglary.
Well, I believe a robbery is when you go into a place and there's a person you rob from them. Burglary is like, you're like a cat burglar, you know what I mean? Like it's no one's home and you go and steal the jewelry or whatnot, Like you rob a house, but you're burglarizing. You're a burglar.
Which do you think is a more serious crime?
Robbery for sure.
Oh, okay, you're right.
Because anytime if you walk into a Circle K and you say, don't move and give me all the money, that's kidnapping. So you have a kidnapping charge on top of it because you're stopping someone from leaving.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You took it to a whole new level.
Well, I don't know. Like, it is like, I'm sure, like, if you walk to someone's house and they're like, there, you're like, get the fuck out. I'm going to steal your shit. Mm-hmm. Like, probably not going to get a kidnapping charge. But if you walk into a bank.
And you tell them not to leave.
And you say, nobody move, nobody leave. Every person that's in that bank, if there's 20 people, you get a kidnapping charge for each one of those people.
Okay.
So, really bad idea to do that.
Good advice. None of our listeners are kidnappers, though.
I would hope not.
Okay, so you're pretty much right. Burglary involves entering a property with the intent to commit a felony. If you're illegally entering a property, you don't even have to actually commit a felony. You just have to have the intent to commit the felony. Technically, in a burglary, you could go into like your ex-girlfriend's house with the intent to rough her up or steal her dog. Maybe you don't steal the dog, but you do enter the premise without her permission. That's a burglary, even if you don't steal anything. So this, I found this on Arizona Criminal Law Team. It says burglary is a wide open charge. There are 100 different ways you can commit a burglary, and there are different degrees of burglary. You could burglary a residence. You could do a burglary of a non-residential structure, a burglary of a business, and depending on the type of structure, that will either increase or reduce the seriousness of the felony. Either way, it's a felony. Yeah. So you were right about that. A robbery, you're right, is a much more serious crime. It involves actually robbing another person, taking property from a person against his or her will. You might threaten them or use force. But basically, if you are intending to take their property, or you do take property and you use threats of harm or fear, then that's robbery, and that's more serious.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with robbery because, like, if you go into a bank, and you put your hand in your pocket and you I have a gun, give me all your money, they're going to charge you with a gun charge, even if you don't have one.
Even if it's just like a finger gun.
It doesn't matter.
Wow.
Because you presented that you had one, so it's like the intent. All
Oh,
that
the
stuff,
intent. Yeah, that's so interesting. The FBI says robbery is taking or attempting to take anything of value by force or threat of force or violence and putting the victim in fear of force. In order for a robbery to take place, nothing has to actually be stolen. Oh, that's important. A former LA DA, Los Angeles DA, says robbery includes the fear of force. It's considered a violent crime. And then burglary, again, is just the unlawful entry of a structure with the intent to commit a felony or a theft. You don't have to enter with force. It's just like, you just enter it. You haven't been invited in necessarily.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you walk up to a house, you're walking down the street and the door's open, you go and steal their TV. That's still like, you're robbing. You're robbing them. You're robbing them. You're robbing them.
And then, interestingly, automobiles are not included in either. That's like a completely separate thing.
It's Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a totally different thing.
Totally different thing. I don't have any more information on it, so we're not going to get into it.
Well, because like a house is like it's a standing property structure.
Right.
And a car is like a little bit different,
Right.
It's like, it's kind of a car. You can go ahead and like take that a little bit, but not too much.
I mean, do you think that the name Grand Theft Auto is only cool now because of the video game, or do you think it was just a cool name to begin with?
Well, I think it was a cool name to begin with.
Grand Theft Auto.
Well, yeah, it's like,
It's cool. It sounds cool. I bet so many like teenagers steal cars just so that they can say they've like done Grand Theft Auto.
Well, I actually knew like a guy whose name was Herbie. Mm-hmm. Interesting name, right? Total redneck.
Like Herbie the
like the love bug, Herbie.
Yeah.
He was a portly dude, but anyways, like him and some buddies, like we were in high school, and like him and some buddies like stole a truck, right? Like they stole like a newer like Chevy truck, and they stole it in the intent to. This guy needed the tires. This guy wanted the axles.
They were gonna like take they piece it apart.
They stripped it, and they did a great job. But they stripped it. They tore it apart, dumped the evidence in the Santa Cruz River, which is where everybody dumps car parts and things you want to get rid of.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, you're such a Tucson local.
But you know what this dipshit did? He got pulled over the cops for speeding because, we used to race on like Saturday night and stuff, our cars and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he had the license plate of the truck that they stole in his truck. It's like, dude, like, that's
a better Grand Theft Auto.
That's literally the first thing that you get rid of is the registration. You know what I mean? Like those are the numbers.
So he got caught, obviously.
He got caught. But he was like 16, so he, did some community service. I don't think he got a felony for it. I think he got away pretty clean. Woke him up, but it was really, really
Are you still friends with Herbie?
No, we weren't really that. He was kind of an acquaintance. Like I helped him put an engine in a truck one time. It wasn't stolen as far as I know.
You have to say that now.
I don't want to incriminate myself.
Okay. Next question. I'm going to ask it to you because I already know the answer, obviously. Can you tell me the difference?
Yes.
What is the difference between suffocation and strangulation?
Well, suffocation is when your airway is restricted by like something, like if you put a bag over someone's head or a pillow.
Right, but you don't have to actually cover your mouth when you're done.
I thought we were on video. But strangulation is when you restrict the airway with force.
Oh,
so then when you get more of like, I don't know, I could be just shooting out of my ass, but
that's fine.
You get like. There's like aneurysms and like burst capillaries that happen when you get strangulation versus suffocation.
Oh, you're really getting into the medical terminology here.
I watch some CSI every once in a while and stuff.
That's because I never stop putting on CSI.
I know, like a professional now.
Okay, that's not far off. So strangulation is when something gets caught around a person's neck and prevents them from breathing. Suffocation is when something blocks a person's mouth or nose or compresses their chest, and this prevents them from breathing. So, I mean, that's the biggest difference, is that strangulation, you can't breathe because there's something around your neck. Suffocation, it's your mouth, nose, or chest, and that's why you can't breathe. From the law offices of Stephen Naiman criminal lawyers, they say that strangulation is defined by a statute as the intentional interference of the normal breathing or circulation of blood by applying substantial pressure on the throat or neck of another person. Suffocation, they define as the intentional interference of the normal breathing or circulation of blood by blocking the nose or mouth of another. Pretty much exactly what I just said. But both of these crimes carry an increased potential penalty when aggravating factors are present. So it's aggravated where the defendant knew or had reason to know the victim was pregnant, the defendant knew of a restraining order in effect against them or against the defendant, or it caused the strangulation or suffocation caused serious bodily injury, or the person doing it had a prior conviction for strangulation or suffocation. Then that elevates it to like another charge.
That's interesting because like it makes sense. Like if you willfully put someone in a box with no air,
yeah,
it's kind of abrogate. Yeah,
nightmare.
like if you're, I guess it's not like a lot of ways where oops, I accidentally did that. But it's interesting.
Oops, I accidentally locked you in a box with no air.
Yeah. But it's interesting how it's like it's aggravated even more if the person had been convicted. It's like if you've ever been convicted of strangling someone to death, like I feel like you shouldn't be available for that charge anymore because
That's
it's
true.
kind of,
you would hope that you've already been like convicted and you still have the opportunity to do that again.
Like let's say I'm just throwing it out there. Let's say you're a crazy person. You're like, I'm obsessed with this person. I'm going to like keep them in this room. But you didn't realize that there's no ventilation. Like as a kid, you put a lizard in a jar and you like forget to put the holes in the top, you know?
God, I hope you never did that. That's terrible.
No, I always knew that like if you catch a little lizard, you have to give it air and water and all that stuff.
Or like a firefly or a cricket.
Yeah, all those things.
Okay, good.
But the thing is though, is that it's not really like oh, whoops.
I forgot.
I grabbed them by the throat or wrapped a rope around their neck and yanked
It's hard
on it
to
pretty hard.
accidentally
Yeah.
strangle or suffocate someone. This reminds me of two things that we've recently watched, actually. One is the new Criminal Minds Evolution, where,
Which you're obsessed with.
I'm obsessed with, I love, where I think the character's real name is Joe Montana. I'm not sure.
Montana.
Yeah, I think so. And he gets put in the underground thing. And remember, he keeps checking that device that tells him how much oxygen is left in there because he'll suffocate because he's in an enclosed structure with only so much, you're breathing out. You can only survive for so long. And then another one, you're not going to remember this. Remember one day you came home and I was watching a new Netflix show called Kaleidoscope. And remember, each episode is like pink, violet, green. It's like a different color.
Yeah, kaleidoscope.
Uh-huh. And
there was plenty of Izzy farts. Is that what you're talking about? The suffocation?
No. Shit, I just lost what I was going to say. There was something that happened in that show that involved suffocation or strangulation, and now I'm totally drawing a blank. Oh, I remember. Okay, remember the Gus Fring from Breaking Bad?
Yes.
His character. And then the white dude character, they were robbing that
Walter
like rich.
White?
No, in Kaleidoscope, his white friend, they were robbing that like older man's house, and they brought the women back, and then they went upstairs to the closet, and they were like, "We're gonna rob this safe," but the old man who they were robbing started coming upstairs. So Gus
so he
Fring
locked him in the safe.
locked himself in the safe. Well, the white guy kind of like put Gus Fring got in there, and the white guy closed it. That could be an accidental suffocation. He wasn't trying to kill him. He was just trying to hide him.
I know, but also it's during a robbery.
That's true.
So boom, extra charge. You know what I mean?
But that kind of like, that's the only
Unaggravated.
right.
Suffocation.
Because you were saying
Maybe
like,
that's
how
part
are
of
you
it.
going to ever lock somebody in a box accidentally?
Yeah,
That was it.
In the odd chance that you're like
I just came up with an
burglarizing
example.
like someone's house and you're like, I have to lock my bro in there because like we don't want him to see us,
But that's a good
It's
example.
either that or strangle the guy coming in the room. So either way, you're getting jammed up.
Ooh, there's a strong Izzy fart coming your way right now. I smell it.
If I get suffocated, you're getting charged. I wonder if there's like an additional charge during like a podcast or like during like a production of something,
Well, probably.
You know? If
Put
there's
it on
money to
lookup
be
list number
made and
3.
stuff, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
what's going on? Like, oh, it's a problem.
That's right. We'll put it on the next lookup list.
Or not.
Okay, so the next one, Jenna just wrote down anything else on homicide by unspecified means. So I had said in the episode that like both girls, their deaths, there was no actual cause of death or manner of death that was determined. They couldn't determine how they were killed. It could have been suffocation. It could have been strangulation, hence the previous question.
Well, let me ask you a question. The reason because of that is because the length of time between they found their bodies, or...
No, because, well, for Isabel, the 6-year-old, she went missing in 2012. They didn't find her body until like 2017, I want to say. I don't have it in front of me. So many, many years. So for her, perhaps. But for Maribel, she went missing in 2014, and her body was found 3 days after she went missing. So no, she was barely decomposed.
But they couldn't figure out like whether it was suffocation or strangulation or anything.
No, because... so there were no obvious injuries or wounds, like no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, nothing like that. And what I had explained in the episode was they couldn't determine the cause of death likely because of her age. She was 13, and the body bounces back so quickly. So if she had been strangled, she wouldn't have bruised so easily as a much older person. And even and if she didn't die right away, her body would have just her skin would have bounced back. It wouldn't have held on to those injuries as easily. And they didn't notice anything. There was no obvious bruising around her neck. There was no obvious, blood vessels in her eyes that popped from being strangled. Like there was nothing obvious because when you're younger, your body doesn't hold on to injuries as easily as someone who's your old, ripe age.
Or maybe like she was injured enough that it eventually caused her death, but didn't, like, you know what I mean? Like if you suffocate someone or like strangle them enough where they're a diminished state, maybe it takes 3 or 4 hours and then your body slightly healing. Like, I don't know. Like, this is all up in the air, but that's very interesting because I understand the first girl, like so long.
So many years passed.
Decomposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, decomposed. Like you can't figure everything out, but 3 days, I feel like they just figured it out, but that's interesting.
They couldn't. Yeah, it was so at the time it was called homicide. They believed that she was murdered because she was found.
Well, yeah, you're a dumped body.
A dumped body. She was found. She wasn't buried actually. She was just like covered up with some tires in kind of a wash basin area near Aver Valley or South Aver Valley and Trico. But it was deemed at the time as homicide by unspecified means. Today, that's no longer how you qualify it. It is now called undetermined. And on the episode, I actually said there's a new podcast out called Undetermined, and it's all about investigating murders where the cause of death is undetermined.
But it's very likely that it's homicide.
Well, right. They determined that it is homicide.
Like if you're coming over to my house,
murdered.
I'll see you for dinner in 30 minutes. You don't show up. We don't hear from you for 6 weeks. And then you're found out in the desert. It's pretty
homicide,
obvious,
right? Know? So they did determine that it was a homicide, but they couldn't say how. So homicide by unspecified means is used to categorize deaths occurring under suspicious or criminal circumstances, but a specific cause of death cannot be identified. So there are. Okay, so this is interesting. When the cause of death is undetermined, this can mean a ton of different things. It appears initially that the medical examiner simply cannot conclude how the person died. However, it's not quite that simple. The main problem is that undetermined doesn't just mean figuring out how a person died. It also is about understanding the intent behind how the person died. So even if there's substantial evidence that it was a murder, if the medical examiner cannot reconcile her findings with the intent of the death, like this person intended to kill them, it wasn't just an accident, then the cause of death will be undetermined. So it's homicide by undetermined means, or it's just undetermined. If she thinks it might have been an accident and it wasn't intentional, then it's not going to be homicide by undetermined means. It's just undetermined.
Interesting. That's a lot of good facts.
Yeah, there's 5 causes of death in most states. Undetermined, natural. What do you think the other 3 are?
Undetermined, natural.
So 3 more causes of death that are generally recognized.
I mean, is homicide one of them, or is it
homicide is one of them.
Accidental homicide?
Accidental, period, is one of them.
Accidental?
And one more.
Undetermined.
No, undetermined, natural, homicide, accidental, or...
Industrial. Oh, suicide.
Yeah, suicide. Yep, that's exactly right.
I mean, that's technically a murder. You murder yourself, you know?
True.
You're dead and you're guilty of it, you know? Here, come and get me, you know? Here's all the evidence. Convict me. Yeah?
Hey, that's kind of funny.
Oh, come and get me, boys.
All right, so the next question was, you won't know about this, I'll tell you real quick. When they were looking for Isabel Celis, the 6-year-old in 2012, not long after she went missing, you know, there was a ton of tips coming in to the tip line and things like that.
Oh, trust me, I know about it. Like watching it was like a huge deal.
Huge deal.
And it went on forever. And like I said, it disappeared. They had no leads.
Yep, no leads for a long time. But not too long after she went missing, a tip came in to 911. Someone called 911 and they believed that it was Isabel because the person who called 911 said, like, Isabel, who is this? Isabel. I'll have to play it for you after the fact. I played it on the episode. It's chilling. Like, it really sounds, if you had no idea that this was a prank call, you would 100% believe this was her calling. She had somehow gotten a cell phone and she was calling 911 because the 911 operator's like, hello, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's like, it's Isabel. He's coming. And then it's like, why are you calling? And she's like, kidnapped. And she's like, are you kidnapped or you know someone who's kidnapped? She's like, it's me. I'm kidnapped. Isabel. And it's 3 calls to 911, one right after another. And it is, I mean, I actually heard it on another podcast and I was like, oh, fuck, this is her. Like this is it. And it was 2 sisters who lived out near Saddle Ranch Road that prank called. They were 9 and 11 years old and they saw the story on the news and they got their dad's like old cell phone that had expired, but still had the ability to call 911 and called 911 and made these like prank calls pretending to be her. Horrible.
That's messed up.
Oh my God. It's so fucked up.
Did they find the girls?
They did find the girls. They traced the calls. They actually arrested the girls. They estimated, so Jenna asked, did the girls have to pay back the $4,700 in police resources that were spent investigating these 911 calls? So they had more than 25 officers, including detectives from the sex offenders registration and tracking unit, went to the neighborhood when they traced the call. And so it was expensive. Like they had a lot of resources into looking into this call that ended up being fucking nothing. And, so they were arrested and brought down to the station. The father of the girls, who wasn't home at the time, the mom was home at the time apparently, but the father wasn't. When he found out, he said, keep them down there to teach them a lesson for a little bit. So that was
smart.
Yeah. So they kept them for a little while. Ultimately, they didn't press charges,
but I mean, they're 9.
They're 9 and 11. The dad, he did reach out. He tried to reach out to the Celis family, is the girl who was kidnapped's family, and to personally apologize. He wanted to have his daughters write apology letters, and he also offered to like meet with the family to apologize in person. I mean, he genuinely seemed to feel terrible.
Yeah, they
that
don't
his
get
daughters
it, but he
did
must
this.
have been mortified.
Oh my God, mortified. So for there was a few days after they were arrested where the Pima County Attorney's Office was debating if they were going to convict the girls or not and charge them, but ultimately charges were not filed.
What was the charge? Like falsely reporting a crime or something like that, or like bad evidence?
Yep.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But so Jenna had wanted to know.
They're 9 and 11. You gotta like,
of course,
let them sit a night in
horrible,
jail. You know,
but you know, they didn't really. I don't think
they
really understood
it now.
Exactly. That's exactly. I did read something that was like terrible, but I guarantee that these girls will never make another prank call again. Like so terrible. Another question was, so to just catch you up, the killer of both of these girls, of Maribel and Isabel, how he was caught was after Maribel her body was found, They didn't find the killer for years. Isabel at this point had already been missing for years. They didn't know whether she was dead or alive. They had never found her body. That was in 2012. Isabel went missing. 2014, Maribel went missing. She was found 3 days later. But for several years still, they had no leads, nothing. And Isabel, no body. They just thought she was out in the world.
So how'd they get the guy?
So they got the guy because they got a tip in, I think it was 2017, that from his ex-fiance, who said when my ex-fiance Christopher Clements was in jail, he was in jail for burglary. He wrote me a letter saying that he had information about Isabel Celis's whereabouts, where her body was. And at this point, they didn't even have a body. They had no idea. And so she called the FBI, gave them this tip. They went and found him. He was either in Pima County or Maricopa County jail, serving like a 20-year sentence for burglary. And I'm sorry, I'm doing this all from memory because I don't have the actual episode in front of me, but they talked to him, and they talked to an old cellmate of his, and the cellmate was saying like, oh yeah, he talked about these girls all the time. They ended up searching his home, whatnot. Basically, he said to these cops, these FBI agents, when they first interviewed him, he said, yeah, I do know where Isabel Celis is. I had nothing to do with it, but I know where she is. And I need you. He
was trying to get a reduced sentence.
And they did. He said, I need you to release my car that you impounded, and I need you to drop my burglary charges in Maricopa County, and then I'll lead you to her body. And they said, fine. And I have the like actual order from the judge I found online. And they did. And he did. He led them to the body. And it was within walking distance of where they found Maribel's body. They found her body. Nobody led them to it. A woman who lived out there saw drag marks through the sand, and she called the police and said, it looks like somebody's been dragged through the desert here. And they went out and searched and found her body. But they didn't find a killer for many years.
But it was that close. They didn't find the other body?
No.
Not buried, right?
No. It was, well, it had been years at this point. Her body was pretty disintegrated.
Guess that's true.
So, you know, I mean, like rain and this and this. So whether he buried it or not in the beginning, who knows? But at this point, it wasn't like laying out there on the surface. We're years in now. And so that was the 13-year-old's body. Somebody saw the drag marks. They found the body very quickly. Isabel, we're now years and, 5 years, and nobody knows. And so he said, when they went to talk to him after his fiance tipped them off, he said, yeah, I know exactly where she's buried. I have nothing to do with it. Drop my charges. I'll take you to it. They dropped the charges. He took them to the body. They found the body. And then he was immediately put back in jail for burglary charges in another county. So it was Maricopa, and then he went to Pima County, or vice versa. I can't remember. And after he was then put in jail again for the next burglary, they started really looking into him, and they searched his home and his electronics and everything, and then found lots of evidence. Granted, it was kind of all circumstantial, but lots of evidence that made it seem very likely he was the
Did he
murderer.
explain why he knew where the body was?
No, he said,
from?
I won't tell you. He said, I can't tell you why or how I know, but I just
like
know.
he's a rat in jail, and like someone told him and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but when he was brought in for questioning, he told police there's actually, or he told his ex-fiance in that letter, there's 4 bodies buried out in the desert at South Aver Valley in Trico that I know about. I'm not saying I had anything to do with any of them, but I know the bodies are there.
Well, we know he has to do with 2 of them.
Definitely. So he went on, again, everyone else has already heard the episode who's taking the time to listen to this bonus. So I'm sorry, I'm not giving you all the information, but he went on trial for the 13-year-old's murder about 2 years ago, was convicted, got life in prison. They severed the murders, which means that he was going on trial for each, even though he was convicted of both murders, instead of trying him all in one, they were trying him separately. So he was tried for Maribel's murder 2 years ago, was convicted, life in prison without parole. He already had like a 30-year burglary sentence that he was serving. And then just last week on February 14th, his trial began for Isabel here in Tucson. And so when we recorded this episode, it hadn't happened yet. So one of the questions that Jen had written down was, what about the other 2 bodies? We know Maribel and Isabel were 2 of the 4. What about the other 2? I searched high and low. I could find nothing. But I did find some additional interesting information that has happened since his trial started just last week, which may not be interesting to you, but might be interesting to listeners. So his ex-fiance took the stands. She took the stand in Maribel's case. She also took the stand last Friday for Isabel's case. And this is new information. She said that Christopher asked her to look when like all this was going down in 2017. He was in jail already for burglary. He contacted her and said, can you look under a rock in the front yard of our old home? I have a handwritten note there and I need you to get rid of it. She did. She found it and she destroyed it without taking a picture of it. And the note reportedly had Isabel Celis' name on it and some type of location information about where she was, which if he found out this information in jail, he couldn't have possibly put that, you know what I mean? Like that was...
It's weird that the fiance is like still in contact. She's like, oh yeah, you want me to bury evidence? No problem.
Well, this was years ago. This was like 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still weird though.
It is.
Hey, can you we used to live here. Can you get rid of this handwritten note that I buried here? It's not a problem. I'm in jail, but just get rid of it.
Well, he was in jail at that point just for burglary. She had no idea. I mean, idiot. I agree with you, actually. Idiot. He also, he had like folders on his iPad that were like locked that they eventually opened that had pictures of like, half naked 10-year-old girls from around Tucson and just like super disturbing stuff. And I said this in the episode, but like the night that Maribel, the 13-year-old, went missing, him and his fiance had a huge fight and he went out. He like left. He was like, fuck you, and left and didn't come home until early morning the next morning. And when he got home, he was like, he had mud on his shoes and stuff. And he took off all of his clothes and he gave them to her. He said, I need you to wash everything. And then after I take a shower, I need you to wash the shower curtain as well and use bleach and clean everything up and clean up all my footprints around the house. And so he took a shower, changed clothes, and then got in his car and left again at like 6 a.m. or something the next morning, while his fiance was like, okay, let me wash all your clothes and the shower curtain and clean the mud.
I feel like she's an accessory.
I mean, I would think so. Yeah. But she claims like, I didn't know. I was scared of him. So I just did whatever he asked me to do.
Yeah. And that's also the testimony. They kind of write you up like, you didn't really do anything. You didn't do anything.
Right.
But you
now
you're giving us information.
Yeah.
It's kind of bullshit, but let's go with it.
So the note that was found under the rock, this is just last week at Isabel's trial. Christopher Clement's attorney said there was no proof that it ever existed because his ex-fiancé never took a picture or anything like that. They also, after his ex-fiancé took the stand, prosecutors called Tucson Police Department Detective Eddie Orozco to the witness stand. He was there when Isabel's remains were found off Aver Valley and Trico Road in Pima County. During his testimony, the state showed pictures of Isabel's remains, and in that moment, her family left the courtroom and they came back in afterwards, but they just didn't want to see any of these pictures. This is all new information to our listeners. I didn't share this in the episode, obviously, because the trial hadn't started. So in addition to Isabel's skull and other remains, investigators said that they found a blanket, and during the detective's cross-examination, Christopher Clements, so the murderers or alleged murderers, lawyer said, when you told Isabel's father, Sergio, who was a suspect for a while, not officially, but people were suspicious, when you told her father that her remains were finally recovered, did he show any emotion? And the detective said he showed no emotion. He never even asked where the remains were found. And the only time that he showed emotion was after he realized that the discovery of his daughter's remains after like 5-6 years at this point was that it would impact him being able to perform in the opera that night because he was an opera singer here in Tucson. Yeah.
Whoa.
So all that's to say that the alleged murderer, Christopher Clement's attorney, is trying to now put, suspicion back on the dad.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It's like, if the opera in Tucson, like I guess I'm not
Arizona
aware.
Opera. They do a lot of stuff in Phoenix, but it's the Arizona Opera.
This is many years later, but still, like,
this was last week.
This should affect your performance in the opera.
Of course it should. Fuck the opera.
He'd be like,
Who
I'm never
cares about
informing
the
that they
opera?
found my child's remains.
Yeah.
Now I have to deal with.
Well, and they also
this
brought
one.
up at the trial last week that it's so interesting. You're probably going to be interested to hear this now after the fact, but like there's a 911 call from Isabel's dad the morning. He puts her to bed at night, wakes up the next morning. She's gone. Her screen is popped out. She's nowhere to be found. He calls 911 and he calls his wife first, and she works at TMC. And she immediately comes home. She gets home from work and her son is also on the phone, and she takes the phone from him and talks to 911. And I have both of those 911 calls, and you hear Sergio, the dad's call 911. It's like, hi, my daughter was abducted from her bedroom, and I don't know why. The 911 operator is like, well, why do you think she was abducted? He's like, I don't know why. It's like very calm. And the mom's call is like, oh my God, I didn't even think about her. It's like hysterical. And so they also brought that up during the trial last week, that like the dad, that's super suspicious, which it was at the time.
But people handle grief or like situations differently. People are calm.
That's what Jenna said.
But it is weird when, and there's circumstances that have happened where it's like, that's just the way a person handles something.
Sure. That's true.
Like being super hysterical, it seems to be, it's fine. Like you can be that way, you can't, but just be like if
my daughter was abducted.
I don't have any children, but I'd be like, someone broke into the house, like my kid's missing, the screen's popped out, someone
That's it.
get out of it.
Oh
like,
my God.
What the fuck? Like you
Stop.
need to get out there.
Okay, stop.
Like call all the cars. Let's get this done. Like
Okay.
I'm freaking out. Like I would be more pissed than anything. I'd be super concerned, but I'd be super pissed.
Okay, but
like,
you just said something
you
that's
need to do
super
it right now.
You just said something that's super important, because the biggest question, and they had like a speech or conversational analyst analyze Sergio's call at the time, and me and Jenna talked about this, because when he called 911, the first thing he said is, my daughter's been abducted. He didn't say missing. He didn't say not in her bed. And you just now, just like talking freely, you were just like spouting off. You said, my kid's missing, because that's the normal thing to say. Why the fuck would you say abducted? You don't know that they've been abducted. Maybe they ran away. And so people thought that was really, really weird. I still think it's weird. I don't think he did it, but I think it's weird.
Well, I mean, it's weird, but you could also be like, the screen's out. She's very young. She's not sneaking out. Like the 13-year-old's like, okay, maybe she's sneaking out French. She's off the screen. She's going out, hanging out with her friends.
Yeah.
6-year-old's like,
6-year-old's probably
but
not.
But still, it's like missing. Like that's
missing seems
it's
to be.
It's a normal thought process of saying it's missing. This person's missing. They're not. They're not where they're supposed to be. It seems weird. It doesn't make sense.
Yep.
But still, the high alert is always there. Like, hey, my friend.
I'm concerned.
He
didn't sound concerned. And the only other thing that is new information to this is that detectives, I don't know why this was never released, because when we recorded this, I never saw this anywhere. But this came up in the trial last week. The detectives found Isabel's handwriting on the inside wall of her closet and found little written notes on the inside wall of her closet that said, I don't like Dad. Dad is bad.
What?
Yeah. I mean, again, doesn't look great, but also could mean nothing.
Well,
I mean, I didn't like my dad sometimes either, So.
But a lack of concern with something. But we can't speculate or anything like that. But it
doesn't matter. I mean, because Sergio was ultimately that's her dad. He was never named as an official suspect. And obviously now there's somebody else on trial for her murder, who I do believe, like, oh, I know exactly where the body is. And at the time he'd also said, I know how she was murdered, but I can't tell you. And I had nothing to do with it. I mean, fuck off, dude. Of course you did this.
Well, yeah. And then there's also.
Wash all my clothes and my shower curtain.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Like, come on.
Don't forget the bleach,
Right. And he lived within a mile. So they lived within Isabel and Maribel didn't know each other, but they lived within like a mile and a half of each other. And then he also, at the time of each of their abductions, which were 2 years apart, lived within like a half a block from each of them. Like, come on.
That's some evidence.
Right. So.
But like you said, going back to like people's reaction to things. Like when I had my rock climbing accident when I was 17, like everybody said, like everybody was concerned, like he's going to the hospital and all this stuff. And it's a different scenario. I wasn't missing, but it's, They told my parents I was going to die.
Right.
My dad was freaking out. Everybody said my mom was just like, okay, so like, where do we go? Like, do we check in with the front desk? You know, everybody. Like,
I could totally see that.
She's just like so chilled, you know. She's like,
totally see
she's
that.
like, so do we like, validate the parking, whatever? You know, it's like, okay, people handle the things differently, but that's a different scenario though.
It is a different scenario.
If someone's like, your loved one has been injured and they're probably going to die, you need to get to the hospital. That's like one thing. Like, you process that in a way. You can be hysterical, or you can be like straight to the point. Let me get a cab. Let me drive myself, whatnot. But you just like wake up in the middle of the night. You like go check on
in the morning. Yeah. 8 a.m.
In the morning, you're like, hey, I'm making pancakes.
Your 6-year-old's gone.
And the window's open and your child's gone. Like, that's a freak out moment. Like, no matter how smooth you are, like, you're smooth on the phone. Like, you're like, hey, there's no way this is not a problem. So we need to get on this immediately.
It's funny.
Like,
I think in the initial episode, I talked about you because Jenna said, I think she made a comment about typically the genders. She said it doesn't always relate to gender. She said, but I think that sometimes like women have a tendency to like panic more or freak out more. And then she was kind of, I can't remember exactly, but she was kind of like, well, maybe not. I don't know. But sometimes I think gender. And I was like, and then we both kind of came to the conclusion that also it's the type of person. And I think I used you as an example. And I said, like, if Henry or Izzy, again, and we made a big point of this in the episode to say, we're not comparing dogs to children. I know people hate that. We're not saying it's the same thing. It's a completely different thing, but it's the closest thing that I can relate. And I had said, like, if Henry went missing, I feel like you would be very like, okay, this is what we need to do. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And like, you wouldn't like freak the fuck out. Whereas I would immediately cry. And I would also be like, okay, what are we going to do? We have to do this. And I go look for him. But we react in difficult situations differently. Yeah, I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but it's just different.
It'd be different ways, but...
And I don't think it has to do with gender. That has to do with personality.
It does have to do with personality. Like I said, like my mom has always been like cool in situations like that. Like she... Sorry, Mom. She freaks out like, it's like, oh shit, you forgot the milk, when we're kids. Like, it's like, oh shit, that's a big ass deal, Instead, they're like, someone just got sawed in half. She's like, well, can they put them back together? Like how much is it going to cost? You know what I mean? Let's just get it done.
Oh, so she's real cool under extreme situations.
100%.
Oh, that's interesting.
Slightly not happening her way.
She's very upset
about it. A little bit of a freak out. You know what I mean?
Got it.
So it just kind of depends on your situation. But like I said, in that situation, like I don't have kids as well, but I have nieces and nephews. Like if my nephew was over my house staying the night, we had a little slumber party, watching a movie, and I woke up and he was not in his bedroom where I put him to bed, and the door was open. I'm immediately calling 911. Probably, I don't know how I'd feel. Probably a little freaked out. But I'd be like, listen. I think
you'd be a lot freaked out.
I'd be a lot freaked out. I'd be able to communicate well over 911, but I'd be like in my truck searching the neighborhood in case he like got out. He's wandering around. It's like crazy or something.
Well, okay, so that makes sense because when Sergio called,
but I sure as shit wouldn't be like, is this going to affect my opera performance?
And that was later. That was when her remains were found.
I know, but it's so bad looking.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
Even if you're not guilty, like
it
be
doesn't
emotionally
look good.
Responsible.
Well, and what was interesting in the episode, we said that like. The day after she went missing, the mom and the dad went down to the police station to just answer questions and talk to them. And one of the final things that Sergio said to the police that day after his 6-year-old is gone and not been found yet, 24 hours missing. He said, like, so when is it appropriate to get back to normal life? Because our sons have softball games. She had 2 brothers. He's like, our sons have softball games that we kind of need them to go to. And people looked really poorly upon that. And I will say that Jenna played devil's advocate and she was like, well, they have 2 other kids to think about that he wants to not disrupt their lives and like kind of keep their lives normal.
Yeah, keep it normalized so that they have less grief. It is true though. I can understand like Jen's style. Like I don't always play that, but it is true. Like some people when stuff happens, like, and sometimes when they're really calm and cool and collected, it's because of shock.
Yeah.
And sometimes people seem cold or
that's true.
Unemotional. Like it seems like they don't, because they don't know how to process it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like in any situation where there's, like mortality, like, warfare, something like that. Like some people can process what happens in a way where they seem all together and they don't handle as well. Other people will shut down. So it's...
Whoa, Henry's like, be done with this recording.
Henry would never shut down.
He's
He'd always
angry.
have to say something.
Henry, you know what's really... Henry, come here. You know what's really funny is that you're pretty good at this. I'm not going to lie. You have good mic etiquette, but except for when you really get into talking and then you take your mic hand and you're like this and you're talking around and you're moving the mic around.
I talk with my hands, you know.
I'm well aware, but you're going to have to talk with your other hand, your non-mic hand, if this ever happens again. But you've done a really good job.
It'd be dope if I learned American Sign Language, because then I'd be like,
ASL?
this is, yeah, exactly. This is for a purpose. I'm not just like crazy
ASL
with
is super unuseful on a podcast, though.
Yeah, obviously. Obviously. Well, we could have the little picture window and like
that's true. We could have Zoom.
Yeah.
We could have Zoom. Well, I think the dogs both are needing to go out, and that is the end of my questions for the lookup list. So you've done a very lovely job. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming, or I guess we're at your house, so thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Besides the farts and bed, the dogs are done, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, the dogs are like, finish up. We could sit here and talk forever, honestly. Exactly. Okay, well, and thank you, listeners, for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, you know that we have our Google Forms on our link tree. Please leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. And otherwise, this is coming out. Oh, it's Sunday night. So this is coming out late tonight. So guess what? New episode tomorrow morning, bright and early. And we will talk to you soon.
And thanks for having me on as a guest.
You're welcome.
Enjoy this wherever you download your podcast from. I always wanted to say that.
That was really professional. I don't think we've ever said that, actually. So good job.
In a world where podcasts are free.
Podcasts are free.
I know. It was a joke. It's a movie thing.
Podcasts are free, except for, we recorded on video the other night, and we think we're going to put that on our Patreon, though, I don't know. Recording on video is a nightmare. It opens up a whole,
Yeah, you got to be pulled together. You can't just act however you want.
I know. It's uncomfortable. Anyways, all right, guys. Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for the new episode 11. And then we'll be back next week with a new lookup list, likely with Jenna. Unless all of you like Mark better.
Please comment below.
Okay. Bye, guys. Say bye.
Bye-bye.